May the words of my lips and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Well, we are certainly living in strange times. Who would have thought at the beginning of our Lenten devotions that we would be celebrating Easter and the Easter season virtually? Through the miracle of modern technology, we are able to be church in our own homes, sharing the peace with one another via our mobile phones, through WhatsApp or other social media platforms. Last year, our eldest granddaughter Chloe departed for university in Plymouth, and during one of my visits to see Dad in his care home, we FaceTimed her. Dad was absolutely amazed that he could see her and talk to her, and in those famous words of Victor Meldrew, exclaimed, "I don't believe it." We live in a sceptical age. Seeing is believing. The story of Thomas reaching out to touch Jesus appeals to us because we understand why he asked for proof. Let's just suppose that we go back 2,000 years or so and tell Thomas about a smartphone. He would be staggered. You can almost hear him saying, "I won't believe that unless I can stretch out my hand and touch it." He would be amazed that with his finger up would pop Google, YouTube and Wikipedia. Perhaps he would be able to look himself up. The evidence for the resurrection of Jesus lies, amongst other things, in the behaviour of the disciples. Immediately after his death, his companions ran away. Even Peter was to prove untrustworthy and deny that he knew Jesus. Yet less than a few days later, these same disciples were to be transformed. The news of Jesus' resurrection and the evidence from the tomb were but the first amazing things to happen. Jesus met them in the upper room, on the beach, and walked with them to Emmaus. He ate meals, they touched him, and he cooked for them. He appeared and disappeared in an amazing way, and sometimes they failed to recognise him. Our experiences of God may be different of those disciples, but nevertheless they are just as valid. Now, if we think about today's Gospel, Thomas had not been present when Jesus had appeared to the disciples and found it hard to believe. He had been a loyal and determined follower, and he must have felt like an outsider, having missed the previous appearances, and found it impossible to believe that Jesus, who he knew had died on the cross, was now alive. Only when he could touch his side and feel the nail prints would he admit that Jesus had overcome death. Like Thomas, we may be called to exercise great faith, but unlike Thomas, most of us have no doubt that God is at work in our lives, even during these dark and dangerous times. As I said at the beginning, we are certainly living through uncertain times. And as I write these words, we do not know when this present crisis will come to an end. However, what we do know is that the world will never be what it was before. It has been interesting to note how even in these last few weeks the world has changed. An improvement in air quality, quieter roads, and even the near perfect view of the Himalayas. As Christians, we must hold fast and remember to share our faith. And this may be through the power of technology, making those phone calls, email or texting one another. It is also important to remember that there will be times when our faith seems to be at odds with what is going on in the wider world, when we may feel alone and deserted. Perhaps at times it is important to remember that although we may feel alone, we are not. And I would like to conclude with that famous passage, Footprints, as a reminder to us all that when faith is at its lowest, that is when we are at one with God. One night, a man had a dream. He dreamed he was walking along the beach with the Lord. Across the sky flashed scenes from his life. For each scene, he noticed two sets of footprints, one belonging to him and the other to the Lord. When the last scene of his life flashed before him, he looked back at the footprints in the sand. He noticed that many times along the path of his life there was only one set of footprints. He also noticed that it happened at the very lowest and saddest times in his life, and this really bothered him, and he questioned the Lord about it. Lord, you said that once I decided to follow you, you'd walk with me all the way. But I have noticed that during the most troublesome times in my life, there is only one set of footprints. I don't understand why, when I needed you most, you would leave me. The Lord replied, My child, my precious child, I love you and I would never leave you. During these times of trial and suffering, when you only see one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you. Amen.